It's 9 minutes away from 8 now. With headlines like skinny celebs exposed and fears for Britney's baby, women's magazines hook us in. Well, they hook many people in anyway. But the story behind the headline isn't always what you've been led to believe. But then, does it really matter? With me now, media commentators Irene, Gardiner and Wayne Hope. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Does it, very quickly, does it matter?
I think it is starting to go too far again. That cover line thing with women's mags is really interesting. A few years back they were getting more and more bizarre and more of a long bow in terms of what the cover line was and what the story was. Then it settled down a bit for a while because I think it backlashed. People thought, well, you just can't believe any of those, so why should I buy the magazine? And it all settled down a bit, but I notice, not so much with the Women's Weekly, which doesn't do it so much, but with Women's Day in particular just seems to be having a wave of it.
We'll go into some details with Women's Day. We've got some exact examples, Wayne, in a moment. But do you think it matters? I mean, do people care whether the headline matches the story?
Well, there's a lot of construction going on in the magazines. It's not just about that. I think digital photography's got a lot to answer for, because since that's come on the market, it's very easy to touch up stories and photos to give a different impression from what might have actually happened. We all know those stories of Di and Dodie and were they actually looking at each other on the speedboat and so on. I think the purpose of these magazines is essentially to introduce women to advertising. They're advertising conduits, really. I did a content analysis of the Women's Day, the New Zealand Women's Week.
See, a lot of people would call it reading. A lot of people would call it reading these magazines. You call it a content analysis. That's something for us to remember, isn't it?
I think Wayne's a regular reader.
What I found remarkable is that the magazines are all pretty much the same. Approximately a third is made up of advertising. Approximately a quarter is made up of celebrity stories. And you add the two together and I got 60% for each magazine. It's very formulaic.
That's on all three of the key women's magazines.
One slight difference I noticed is that the magazine that has the highest celebrity content is the New Idea.
Right.
Which is true, but and the New Idea, see, I mean, the magazines do work to a basic formula.
You've been doing content analysis too, haven't you?
Mine's slightly different. Mine involves lying on the sofa with my cat and, you know, chocolate. And because I enjoy that aspect of the magazines, that blob out, you know, showbiz, gossip, bit of fashion, bit of escapism. I think the cover line thing is interesting. Obviously, you do cut them a bit more slack. I mean, you know, it's not Time magazine or Newsweek.
All right, well, let's talk about slack now. The latest edition of Women's Day.
See,
Charlotte is on the cover.
Too far. Mum's the word, the real reason Charlotte's gained weight. Now, that is basically saying Charlotte is pregnant.
Yep, that's the implication from Mum's the word, whereas in actual fact, she's eaten too much.
Well, Charlotte herself admits she's gained some weight because she's been working on a travel show, rich food, not time to do her normal exercise program. Somewhere in the body of the same story, she says, I'm at an age now where I wouldn't mind having a kid sometime.
Ah, Mum's the word.
There's another problem here too, and that is with the growing proportion of celebrity stories. It dilutes the quality of celebrities if you're recycling the same ones all the time. And increasingly we're getting a certain kind of celebrity who's pretty much talentless except for the fact that they can make it into the media quite a lot. Any other quality or attribute they may have is hard to find. And that's one of the things too that's been a real development.
Well, luckily for some of the magazines, and let's talk about Women's Day's previous issue, the celebrities are recycling their own relationships. And that's very good, although sometimes that's not necessary. This comes into something you were talking about, Wayne, the cover of the previous Women's Day.
Last week's.
Brad wasn't actually in that photograph at all.
No.
But as you can see from the cover, clearly they have implied that Brad is very much part of the threesome.
Although they're quite unashamed about it, because if you look inside, the same photo has Brad on the other side.
So the photo is a misrepresentation. The story, the story actually doesn't relate to him at all.
No.
There's no reference to him in the
And there's another
story.
development too, is I don't know if any of you know that there's a new development in tabloid photojournalism where, you know, you have a picture of Paris Hilton with a piece of toilet paper around her shoe while she's coming out of a restaurant toilet. Lots more photos of stars and celebs with their makeup off or looking pretty dowdy in a park. So I've noticed a lot of those kinds of imagery.
I like that, celebs looking dowdy in a park. I feel a series coming on.
The New Zealand mags aren't quite as trashy as that and that whole sort of celebs without their makeup. The one that has been probably the most trashy has been New Idea, with sort of the Women's Day in the middle and Women's Weekly a little bit more conservative. But interestingly, the New Idea has just got a new editor who has come from being deputy editor, I think, of the Day. And I think you're going to see the New Idea change a little bit now. This was an interesting interesting story. I won't hold it up because I'll put it on the wrong camera and ruin everything, but it's the radio wedding couple. Our son is autistic. This is last week's new idea. And, you know, that was actually quite a nice story. It had good information about autism.
We'll see how long that lasts.
Well, I think it'll last while
Possibly.
Hayley's there.
As it turns out, the child is actually autistic.
Yeah, no, it's a good story.
Yeah, indeed.
It's
I'm not trying to be funny about that, but going back to the Women's Day, Nicole warns Katie, don't marry Tom. Well, she didn't.
No.
Chappelle's coming home. Well, she isn't.
No.
Well, another point that's interesting here is that in the magazine market as a whole, as we know, there are celeb-oriented, gossip-oriented magazines like Who and People magazine. And what's happening with these magazines here in front of us is that there's very much an overlap with the content that you get in a celeb magazine. So you could argue that they're less woman-orientated in a way and more celeb-orientated. Are they,
very quickly to finish, are they good? Are they worthwhile? Are they worth buying?
I find them fun. Don't hit the microphone. I find them fun. I know that the cover lines and the showbiz stories should be taken with a grain of salt. The local stories are a bit more factual, and there is some more journalism stuff in there. What worries me is that maybe some viewers who perhaps are not so aware of media things do take a bit too much of it seriously.
Which is evidenced by some of the letters. Wayne, are they good? Worthwhile?
Well, I would use a junk food analogy. The odd hamburger and so on's fine, but if that's all you eat, or if these magazines are all you read, then you'll either, in one case, have diet problems or you'll go brain dead, one or the other.
All right. Well, every man, woman and child of us is purchasing, on average, 30 a year. So they're an important part of our diet. Irene, Gardiner, Wayne Hope, thank you both very much for joining us.